The instructions are actually very misleading in this case, because here's what they say. Hey everybody, it's Steve from Scram Speed. I'm here with the next video on our 6014 MSD box, carbureted ignition box software deep dive. We had a previous video. The previous video was all about basically the basic functions of the software and showing you how to get around and navigate. This is more about how to use it. We hope that there's a little something for everybody. Launch the software here, and the box is right there. Okay, and so here we are in the box. This is your basic settings screen. It's where we started last time. We went over all the settings in the previous video. If you're curious about them, maybe look that one up. This is the custom one timing table. This is where I spend most of my time when I'm using this box at the track or when I'm playing with customer cars on the dyno. It's a much more friendly and much more obvious read table than the other custom tables. The other custom tables have this more traditional EFI format where one axis here is manifold air pressure sensor and other is RPM. So it's the same data, it's just arranged in a different way. If you're an EFI guy, this might be more native to you, but there's three like that and then one that's arranged like this. But I prefer this style, and I find that most of my customers find this to be more relatable than the other variety. So it's very straightforward. You've got your settings here. You go in, you've got your little grid on the right. It looks like a spreadsheet. You just either type the numbers you want at whatever given RPM in here to make the changes you want, and then it appears on the screen after you make a change, for example, right? So there's that. Very straightforward. Most people get it. You can have a lot of success if you can tell what you're looking at. So I get a lot of questions about what's the best way to start out with this, what's the best way to figure out what my motor needs, all that sort of thing. The thing is that screws up some people. The LS carbureted cars like more timing than the EFI cars do. I don't know why that is, but it's seemed to be universally true ever since we've been messing with this. For example, my car, it's an LS3 with ported heads, a BTR Stage 4 cam, 850 quick fuel, and a Victor Jr. intake manifold. On the LS3, it likes about 30 degrees of timing. An almost identically configured customer car and a 5th gen Camaro with EFI, of course, and it only wanted like 25, 26 degrees of timing. Interestingly, before I had the LS3, I had an Iron Block 6.0 LS, and I had the same cam, intake, carburetor, and cylinder heads on that engine as on this one, and it wanted like closer to 35 degrees of timing. So massive difference based on just a little bit of bore size. The 5.3s that we do, we find out they're somewhere in the middle there, like 32, 33 is where they like it. It's important to find out what your motor actually wants because, especially if you're using nitrous or something like that, you want to know what your base to configure off of is. If you start pulling timing because you're adding boost or you're adding nitrous, you want to be taking from a meaningful number. Example, say you put 35 in all these, just said, hell with it, more is better. I'm going to put 45 in or 35 in all these spots. Then I'm going to spray 150 shot and I want to pull 2 degrees out. Well, it turns out your motor really only likes 30. Then you're still 3 degrees over timed when you're pulling timing for the nitrous, and you could very easily have problems. So what I tell guys to do is put in a safe number. A 25, a 26 is a safe number, and then establish your baseline either on the dyno or at the track. Watch your mile per hour. You add 2 degrees. You need to add enough to make a meaningful difference. You add 2 degrees, 3 degrees on the first go, and you make another pull. You make another pass. You check your mile per hour. You check your horsepower. If you see a gain, then you go back and do the same thing again. And you keep going like that in that loop until you stop seeing meaningful gains. You can, if that last gain where you see just a couple horsepower or just a little tiny bit of mile per hour, dial it back to where you previously were. There is no magic number. It isn't, the number 35 doesn't make the power. The number 33 doesn't make the power. What makes the power is what your motor wants the most. You give it that and you're going to have good success, and then you've got a basic number to start pulling timing from or calculating from. It's really simple. It doesn't take a lot of time, And again, better to have it be what your motor actually wants. A lot of guys ask me about this little dip here. You see this here, and then you see it on the basic file that comes with the MSD. And what that is you're right around here at 52, 52. That's right around where you're going to see peak cylinder pressure typically. So it's trying to ease life on your bearings basically and take a little nip of timing out. I do this all the time. You won't see it in a dyno graph. It's not, or you're not going to see a dip there on a chassis dyno. We have a chassis dyno. We have a Mustang chassis dyno. That doesn't show, but I think it does do a demonstrable job of taking it a little easier on the motor. So just a little pull 2 degrees out there and you're going to be in good shape. The other tables have the map built in as one of the axes here. This has its own breakout table for the map. Even if you don't have the map plugged in, or maybe especially if you don't have the map plugged in, you need to come over and look at this table. Your manifold absolute pressure sensor, it's not the one that came with the engine. It is built into the MSD box. And what this is for is there's 2 things it's for. One, it's so it can tell what your manifold pressure is and take out timing for boost if you need to. If you're adding boost, you always want to take out timing as the boost increases. Or you can add load-based timing. You can have a timing adder based on load, like an EFI car or like a vacuum advance. The idea being that at part throttle, as load increases, you add timing, and it gives you little stuff like, well, I'm starting to go up a hill. I don't have to give it more gas to go up the hill. It's going to add some timing and perk me up as I go up there. You get better fuel mileage, and you get a little better response while you're driving it. For a drag car, it doesn't matter. There is none of this, or none of that load-based timing takes place at wide open throttle, and at idle you won't have it doing it anyway. It's something I recommend playing with if you've got a street car, if you're cruising on the street. These are good settings to start with. Go out, cruise around, try it, make a decent size change to those numbers, and then see where that gets you. This would be the last part of the tuning. The first part is to get your, of course, and I neglected to mention that at the beginning, but the first thing you want to do is get your jetting somewhere close, get your idle mixture somewhere close, and then start messing around with the timing after you take your baseline. If you're adding timing and stuff and you don't have the fuel at least a little squared away first, you're just going to be chasing your tail and you're going to end up having to do it again. Fuel first, then timing. And then the map sensor is basically something that you would do last. It does have a couple of gotchas that are associated with this. If you do have a drag car, if you're racing at the drag strip and you aren't going to use the map sensor, if you don't have the map sensor plugged into intake manifold to get a vacuum signal, you want to come in here and you want to put zeros in all of these, because here's your red line of what it's showing, and typically it's going to show around 100 kPa if it's not plugged in, or atmosphere pressure, and then you'll be in this no zone. Although you can see it's not quite a 0 there, right? So it is going to be doing something. And in a day that it's colder, or a day that it's hotter, or a day you're up in the mountains, or a day you're down at sea level, it could potentially get into one of these curves, and you've got timing, ghost timing, that you didn't know you had in there. And the only way you'd be able to figure it out be look at your data logger, be like, why does this have more timing in it or less timing in it than's in my timing table? And it would be something like this. So again, if you're not using this, you need to come in and zero this out. There is another thing that you can do with this. Nick Evdos over at BTR, what he uses this for is he plugs it into his valve cover, and he has a vacuum pump, and he uses it to measure crankcase vacuum. So he can see how well his vacuum pump is working, which is an ingenious way to use it for something that it wasn't intended for. But you do that, you look at the log, and of course he's not putting any timing in based on it, but he is able to, because any of these sensors that you can change the thing for, you can also log them in the data logger, so you can make a pass and you can see, well, how much vacuum am I really putting on the crankcase. So that's a nice feature. This is where your vacuum advance would come from if you, or you're the closest equivalent you're going to get to a vacuum advance situation with the LS carbureted deal, and it's useful for other things as well. But again, zero it if you're not using it. Oh, and the last thing, of course, the biggest gotcha you would want if you run boost with this, you need to remember that this is 2.5 bar map sensor, so it's good about 22, 23 psi maybe of boost. If you go beyond that, it just quits doing anything. It reverts to the base timing. Say you got 22 pounds of boost. Say you're pulling 18 degrees there. You go 25 pounds of boost. It's pulling 0 degrees. It goes to whatever this timing table says at whatever RPM you peak that boost. And of course that blows things into little tiny pieces. So If you're making that much boost, either A, get a different solution to run your timing, or B, don't use the map sensor at all and plug in the values you want in this table instead of using the map sensor to pull as you go. That'd be kind of a kludgy way to do it, but at least it isn't going to set off any fireballs. The other sensor you've got that you can affect your timing with is your temp sensor. And again, this is a really useful item. Almost everybody's got a temp sensor that came with their engine, so they just, all it is a matter of doing is just plugging it in. And what you use that for is you can have it when it's cold. You can have it add timing to try to ease cold start issues. You can also use it as a safety. If the thing starts overheating, you can have it pull all kinds of timing out so the thing will fall off. And that tells you you're going down the track and the thing falls way off. Your first instinct should be to lift off the gas, right? And maybe if you've got this set up, your second instinct is to look at your temp gauge and go, oh, I forgot to turn my water pump on, or oh, I must have thrown my belt, or something like that. Anytime you can use the computer to give you a safety, I highly recommend doing it. LS engines aren't getting any cheaper, and there's no reason to blow something up when you had something built in that could have saved you. The other thing to do, and this is where some people get led astray, the other thing to realize is, just like the map sensor, if this isn't plugged in, the computer doesn't know that. It is still going to make whatever you've got in this table happen based on what it thinks the coolant temperature is. And what it thinks the coolant temperature is, if it's not plugged in, it is -40. And as you can see, that's all the way over here, and it's where this red line is. And you can see that in the base table, it's adding 5 degrees of timing there. So you're going to go and you're going to make your nitrous pass, and you're going to put 200 to it, and you got it, your timing at 18, 19 degrees. Not that that's a recommended for your car, but my car, you got your timing at 18, 19 degrees. You don't have this plugged in, or your sensor went bad, and it thinks it's -40 degrees, and you're adding 5 more degrees of timing, and that could really mess you up as well. So again, if you're not using the temp sensor, you need to come in here and zero this out. And if you are, it's worth checking to see, maybe to peek in here and see what temperature it's actually showing you. And if it's not showing you something like your engine temperature, or it's showing you -40, you need to realize your sensor's failed, and then you need to zero it out. The instructions are actually very misleading. The MSD instructions are very misleading in this case, because here's what they say. They say if the sensor is not installed or is faulted, shorted, or open, meaning failed, the temperature in the graph will default to 50 degrees Celsius, 122 Fahrenheit, so the number surrounding 50 Celsius should be left at 0. But as we can clearly see, with no sensor plugged in, I don't have a sensor plugged into this because it's just sitting here at my desk, it is at -40, right? Which is what you've got over here. You can monitor these over here. So clearly that's not correct. What the instructions say is not correct. And then just, kind of demonstrate, I'll plug a sensor in here, and bing, the temperature instantly goes to 65 degrees, which it's 65 degrees in the office where I'm recording this video. So again, MSD, you need to correct that before you blow somebody up. So there's that. You can use this sensor also as like an air temp sensor if you want, if you can find some use out of that. And what that could be used for, Nick over at BTR, he says he used it to try to kind of see if he saw temperature changes. He was using that to measure airflow efficiency in the air pan and the scoop and stuff he was making. The other thing you could do, everybody kind of has a little superstition about what temperature their car likes going down the track. Carbureted cars do like to have a little heat in the intake manifold, but exactly how much? Well, you can use this sensor to log that on every pass and then monitor your performance. A bracket guy, for example, would really love to know, what temperature does it actually like the best, or where am I going to be able to make it perform consistently? And I'm doing this behavior to make the car perform consistently. Is it actually keeping my intake air temps consistent? So again, something it's not intended for. You wouldn't want it to have it add in any timing in that case. Of course, you'd still want to have the graph zero, but again, you look at the logger and you can see it in there, and you can compare that with your time slip and get some good data that way. So that's another potential use for that. It's neat to have this sort of EFI technology built into our carbureted cars, because we can use it to go faster and we can use it to be safer just like they can. The next thing over is your individual cylinder timing. Individual cylinder timing is not something that carbureted guys have ever had much exposure to or ability to do. Of course, we got cool coil unplug with the LS, and really neat crank trigger and cam sensor and all that jazz. So we've got individual coils, so it's a pretty easy matter to change the timing in the individual cylinders for the computer to do it. But what are you going to use this for? These LSs, they do tend to have cylinders that run hotter. Sometimes maybe it's because they didn't gap the rings the same at the factory, or sometimes it's for the particular flow characteristics of your intake manifold. For whatever reason, if you're reading plugs, a lot of times you're going to see that certain cylinders are hotter than other ones. If you can read a plug and you know that, then you can go in and you can maybe take a little timing out. You know, have you ever noticed everybody talks about when their engines blow up, they blow up the same cylinders over and over? Probably that's what you're going to find is going to be your hotter cylinder. You can go in, you can take a degree or two of timing out of that cylinder, see if it hurts overall performance, see if it cleans your plugs up, that kind of thing. Something too I had a guy ask me about, well, the axis on all these tables, they're all the same, and they all have map over here. It's like, well, Steve, what if I'm not using the map sensor, or what if I'm not using the map sensor for what it's intended to? I don't want to have my timing adjustments being based on whatever the map sensor isn't really reading. And the answer to that is simple. It's you just go above the RPM that you want to make the change at, and you do every column. You'll fill in every single one of these with the number you want to pull. Say you want to pull 2 degrees out of cylinder 8 above 3,000 RPM. You would go to this whole grid right here, and you would just pull 2 degrees out of every single one of these boxes, and then it doesn't matter what your map reads. It's going to pull that timing like you ask it to. So really useful feature if you read your plugs, and if you spray nitrous, you really should. You can probably have some info there that can make your stuff last a little safer, and maybe you can even squeeze a little more power out of it. $550 for a box. It's not chicken feed, but this really does have some good features for that. It isn't just, well, this makes it so I can run a carburetor with my LS. You can do other cool stuff with it too. Try it out sometime. Let me know what you think. If I'm not going into any of these features in depth enough for you guys, let me know. If you have questions, hit me up. I will do my best to answer the questions in the video. I have been running this box for 6 or so years. We have sold about 1,000 of these things on eBay alone. We've sold a bunch on our website too. We've talked to a lot of people all over the country. We've helped a lot of people have really good success with these, and we do believe in the product. If you don't have one yet, check out our website. If you buy an MSD box from us, you get free shipping and you get a free LSX T-shirt. So check us out if you get a chance, or send your friends our way if they're just super impressed with how your car is running. Step retard, I talked about this in a little bit in the other video. It does a good job of making things easy with the way you can have it ramp the time instead of just having it pull all the timing when the switch turns off, or when you activate the wide open throttle switch, or having it dump all that timing back in when you let off of it. You can ramp it in and out over time. Saves parts, right? You know, if you go down the track and at the end of the track you let off the gas, your rings are glowing because you just made a pass and you were spraying all kinds of nitrous at it, and then when you let off the gas it immediately dumps 10 degrees of timing back into the engine. So that's hard on bearings is what that is, and that also is where you can crack a piston or something if you're running hyper piston still. So that's a neat feature. Confession time. I don't use this feature in my car. My car's a race car. My car's not a street car. I don't use this feature, and here's why. Because when I am making my timing changes at the track, I want to be able to look at a table and know what I'm getting. Maybe there's money on the line, or maybe there's just bragging rights on the line or whatever. You've gone a bunch of rounds. You got up early that morning. It's been really hot all day. You haven't eaten anything for a couple hours. You got 10 minutes to make lane call. You still got to get the nitrous bottle in the car. You got to get it heated up. You got to see about putting some timing in the car because the next guy was pretty quick last round. So you got all that stuff going on in the back of your head. Do you really want to look at a table and think, okay, I'm pulling 2, I'm adding 1, I've got all kinds of modifiers to what this table is? It's like, no, I want to look at this table and I want to see it had 19 last time and now it has 20. And I know that's what the timing is going to be going down the track, and I don't want the computer doing what I'm telling it to do and adding timing in some place that I've forgotten about because I haven't had anything to drink for an hour. So something to keep in mind. Keep it simple. Maybe you're really good at math and you never make mistakes. Cool, then you don't have to worry about it. But for me, I want to see what I'm getting and go down the track that way. So just a little bit of advice there. Next feature is the launch retard. And this is a fantastic feature. If track's getting a little greasy, this can really give you an edge. If you're racing in a no prep thing, of course, at a fully legal and above board sanctioned racetrack event is the only place any of us would ever dream of racing no prep. But if you're doing that, then this is something that can really help you out a lot. When the surface isn't what you expected, or maybe it's changed as the sun's gone down, or changed as the sun's gone overhead, you can massively affect the way your car behaves, and you have a slider to control this that maybe the other guy doesn't have, which gives you a big leg up. The trick to this feature is, there's one big trick to this feature and getting it to work for you, and that is you need to practice with it before you need it. If the first time you look at this screen and try using this is the time you know the track's slick and you know you need it, you're not going to be able to make the changes unless you just get extremely lucky. You're not going to be able to make the changes you need to make to get your car to run the best it should. So sometime when you're at the track and you're just making passes, or you have a weekend where you're like, well, I want to go racing, but I don't have any reason to go to the track, this would be a good time to play with this feature, because it does take some getting used to. There is a little bit of a learning curve with it. You need to learn not only how much timing do you have to pull to get the car to change, you also have to know, and this is always going to be a little bit of a guess, but you also have to know how long it's going to take you to ramp it in. Because if you ramp it back in too soon, you're just going to light them up 40 feet down the track instead of right at the start. So again, guys, really powerful feature. Don't sleep on it, but try to use it sometime before you need it. It can win your races. It's won races for me. So don't forget about it, and good luck with it. Make big moves. That's the secret to learning it, is make big, bold moves and measure the effect. The next thing is data acquisition. This is a very powerful feature. It is not the world's best data logging. It is absolutely not comparable to what the EFI guys get, either with HP tuners or with Holley EFI or Haltech or any of that. It is not as in-depth as those features. On the flip side, maybe for a lot of guys who aren't used to data logging, that makes it a whole lot easier to deal with. I'm in my 50s. I have a really hard time getting the guys my age to start using data logging. They didn't have it coming up, so they're not familiar with it, and they don't really appreciate everything it can do for them. So, old guys, this one's for you. Try this out. Mess with it. It will teach you things. It will embarrass you, because it will tell you stuff that you were screwing up that you didn't know, but it will also tell you things about your car that you might not otherwise see. This is a feature, if you guys are interested in it, I could do a whole video about the data logging, even as simple data logging as this is, not just for this box, but for data logging features in general. But I could go on about this box and what it can do for you for quite some time. I'll show it to you just a little bit here, but I don't want to make the video super long just for that. If you guys are interested in the data logging, please leave me a message in the comment. I'd be happy to make another video to go over it a little bit. But I can tell you, for basic reasons, just log everything here. It doesn't take up that much extra space in your computer. I just have all these selected. That way, if you ever want to go back and look at an old log, you can just click any of them that's already in the data log. You'll see where we click them, and then you can see it. This is, your activation settings. The way they come set up is pretty good. It comes with 60 seconds here. I always turn it down to 30. But again, even at the basic settings, you can store a whole lot of data logs before you got to start erasing anything. The one gotcha that people do have with this, you do have to download it to the computer to view the data log. You can't read them from the box directly. So when you've got them to import, you will see there's a little thing you have to check each box for each log you want to input, and then you bring them down, and then you can view them. When you view them with the MSD review software, which is also bundled with the computer. Comes on the USB flash drive. You can download it from Holley. This is an old file of mine, and just for example, you can see what's your converter reacting to your, how big a converter drop have you got going on the track, which means, do I need another converter? You can find out here. You can find out how well you're nailing your shift points. You got these little indicators here that show you red is red and blue is blue. So you can see, well, you know where your shift light's set, and you know where you actually hit the shift, right? 7,500 is my shift point, 7,430. I pulled it just a little bit early. So you can see that. You put the difference between these two. You can see the time difference between these two indicators. There's a lot of stuff you can see when you can use stuff in a way that you maybe wouldn't have thought of. The step retard on my car, it comes on. Well, I've got it wired to my wide open throttle switch, so as soon as the nitrous comes on, the step retard comes on. You can use this to see if your foot is coming off the gas, because your foot's supposed to be all the way down the track, but if this is wavering at any point, then you know my foot came off the gas there, or maybe my wide open throttle sensor is bad, or my wide open throttle switch is bad, which is again something you probably want to know about. And the reason I chose this log was because the ignition voltage here right? You can see this on this screen. It's got this really wavy line, and if we look into the data, red is red 11.0. Interesting. Blue is blue, or 11.02. The even at 7,000 plus RPM going down the track, I mean, it's a carbureted car with an ignition box and nitrous on it, right? It is not a very I don't have subwoofers in the back. It's not a very electrically demanding vehicle, and I was only making 11 volts, and I had this really crazy wave going down the track. So shortly after this log, that alternator failed, right? And if I had been looking at this, even giving it a cursory examination after some passes, I would have known I had a parts failure coming up. And that could have maybe kept me from missing a round of racing, because all of a sudden I didn't have the juice I needed and I didn't have a charging system. It'll give you a lot of intel that there's no other way you would ever pick it up. And it can give you early warnings and stuff. It can give you indications on where you need to work on your driving performance. And it really can tell you a whole lot. Why did it fall off? Why did I fall off a half a mile an hour on that pass? And you'll look in there and see, oh, my foot came off the gas, or, oh, look, I had a big voltage drop, or my ECTs are way higher than I would have guessed they'd be. Something like that. Super useful. And there isn't any reason to not use it. It comes with a box. It's basically running all the time anyway, so you might as well take a look at it. It can improve your performance. I want all my LS Carbs brothers and sisters out there running as fast as they possibly can be. We got to put those EFI guys on the trailer, guys. So do everything you can to get your car to go as fast as it can. Well, that's about all I've got for today, guys. If you like LS and Carburetor, we have a lot of this kind of content coming your way this summer. I'm putting a 5.3 LC9 in my car with a cam, and we're going to try out a different carburetors on the dyno. If you're curious what makes a good carburetor for an LS, we're going to demonstrate that. There's a lot of bad info out there. We sell carburetors, and we've used a lot of carburetors on a lot of LSs. So if you're having a hard time picking out a carburetor, or you're not sure what's best, give us a call. We'd love to help you out in that regard. We really like helping car guys like us, and I do a lot of stuff with LS and carb, not just on LS. We tune cars in lovely Mahomet, Illinois. So if you're local to us and you need some help with getting it going right, we'd be happy to help you out with that. But in any case, the most important thing is, if you like this kind of stuff and you find it entertaining, give us a like and a subscribe, because we've got a lot more of it coming. And we hopefully can help you with your project and make your car faster. I'm Steve, and that's all I've got for today. Thanks for checking us out, and hope to see you next time.